So today I've got your full in-depth review of the new Google Pixel Watch, diving into all of the features, how they work in real life, including things like accuracy testing, and also how it compares to something like the Fitbit Sense 2 that I've been using side by side over the past week. With that, let's just go straight into it. The first thing is the price. It is $349 US or $399 with the LTE option built in. There is one size, a 41mm case size, which is a bit of a small size when it comes to wristwatches today or smartwatches today. Within that, there are 3 different stainless steel chassis colors. And then beyond that, there are 7 different band types, and each one of those band types has like a gazillion different color options. Now, one of the most defining visual features of this watch is just how like clean and modern it looks. Some people like that and some people won't, and that's just fine. But the way that's accomplished is by having the band go into the watch body itself and having the entire latch mechanism be inside the watch body. In order to access that though, you have to press these little buttons next to the watch bands, and honestly it sucks. Like Google at the event, they said you kind of get used to it when I was there at this hands-on event after the launch, and I'm not used to it yet, and I don't think they are either, because I watched a bunch of Google Pixel Watch employees fidget with this little button trying to get this thing over. These people have been using it for like a year and they're still not getting it right. As a result, I suspect this is something we will not see carried over into a next hardware iteration of the Pixel Watch, you know, like a Pixel Watch 2.0, probably a year from now, though I do still greatly appreciate the number of bands that Google has launched with this watch. The display has up to 1000 nits of brightness. There's actually even a toggle option you can choose in there to go ahead and go to that full brightness level when outdoors in full sunny conditions. It's got Gorilla Glass 5 on it, so in theory it's pretty durable, and it does seem pretty durable. I've whacked it on all sorts of things over the last few days and there's no scratches or anything like that. And it's also water resistant to 50 meters, so you can swim with it, shower with it, and there's no concerns there. Now, as you would expect, it runs WearOS 3.5 to be precise. That's the same WearOS version that you'll find on the Samsung Galaxy Watch 5 series. And again, WearOS 3 has been out for about a little over a year now, but we'll get to the apps bit in just a second. Finally, the battery life is claimed at 24 hours, which is pretty much the norm in this category. Like if you look at both Samsung and Apple, it's about the same for an AMOLED display, kind of always on, fully smart watch. I put the charging times on the side right now. I'd say both the battery life and the charging times are pretty much what they're claiming. I've been using it in the always-on display configuration. I've been having to charge it pretty much every day, and the charge times are about what they say as well. So with that, let's talk about kind of day-to-day usage. The first thing is obviously there is a touchscreen on it. I haven't had too many issues with sweat or even water, even like in the shower. There's no like wonkiness on the touchscreen, so that's pretty good. On the right-hand side, there is the digital crown. You can tap that once to access your list of apps, or it also acts as kind of a back or escape option to get back to the watch face. In the upper right-hand corner is another button. That one, if you tap it once, you get to the most recent apps, and if you long hold it, you'll get to Google Assistant. You can then use the microphone on the watch to go ahead and ask Google Assistant a question, and it'll give you back an answer using the speaker on the watch. What's the best smartwatch?
I found these results.
Oh hey, just a quick note, if you're finding this interesting or useful or something, if you can whack that like button at the bottom there, it really does help with this video and the channel quite a bit. As for the watch face, there are a bunch of different options you can choose from, and then those options are also customizable. So if I take the stock watch face that you see right there, on the left-hand side, there is the steps. On the right-hand side, there's the current heart rate. In the middle, there's that Fitbit icon. I can choose if I want to swap out those different metrics. If I tap that middle Fitbit icon, it launches the Fitbit dashboard. And that's where I can go and see all of my Fitbit-driven kind of health metrics for the day, like steps and flights and all that kind of goodness is listed there. And then you can tap on each one of those tiles to get more information about it. That's actually notable because in the Fitbit Sense 2, you can't tap on those tiles to get more information about it, which is kind of crazy. But nonetheless, it's cool to see on the Pixel Watch that you can tap into each one of those things. And we'll talk about more of that in just a second. Back on the main watch face, if you swipe from the left, you can go ahead and see your current heart rate over the last few hours. And if you swipe from the right, you go through a bit of a carousel of tiles. You can add more tiles if you want to. Tiles can be both Google or Fitbit-based tiles as well as third-party apps. So you can see here I've got a Strava one and a Komoot one that I've added from those watch apps that I've downloaded to the Pixel Watch. And tiles are basically like quick access widgets, if you will, to get in different portions of the app or different features. So now diving into those Fitbit portions a bit more, because this is in theory like the ultimate Fitbit watch. And yes, that's true in some ways, but not true in others. There's missing features here that are on not just the Fitbit Sense 2, which is a cheaper price point, but even the $99 Fitbit Inspire 3 that are not on the Pixel Watch. So going back into that dashboard, you can see all your stats there. You can scroll through those. numbers. One of the stats you won't see though is SpO2 readings or blood oxidation level readings. That's something that is not currently offered on this watch from a software standpoint, but is there from a hardware standpoint. In fact, Google's actually using that sensor already for some of the blood oxygen variation bits that you'll see in the Fitbit app, but that's just showing like the variation compared to your baseline. It's not really showing the exact numbers. Now, I want to point out something interesting here, in that in my testing, I did not use the premium version at all. I wanted to show you what it's like to not pay for the fancy premium edition, though you do get a 6-month trial, but as we all know, you forget to cancel a trial, then you're paying for it, and so I just want to show you here in this review everything that you get out of the box without paying anything more. So once in that Fitbit app, you can see your data from today. You can scroll up and down this main dashboard page, and then you can also go dive into seeing data from historical periods. And so, for example, in steps, you can see as much step history as you want, as far as you want, without premium. There's really like one area that you'll see premium bits kind of show up a bit, and that's if you tap this health metrics option. And that's where you're gonna see your breathing rate, your resting heart rate, your HRV data. Now for me, in my case, for some reason, my HRV data and breathing rate data isn't showing up correctly. I think that's due to a sleeping bug that I ran into as well. But those 3 sets of data, if you want more than 7 days, you have to get Fitbit Premium. However, that's not actually true either, because if you look at the resting heart rate, there's another portion of the Fitbit app that you can see back as far as you darn well want for free. That's baked in there. However, where you do start to see some more differences is in the sleep data. So if I crack open the sleep data, first off, on the watch itself, I can see my sleep from last night, my sleep phases, or sleep stages, if you will. And then on the Fitbit app, I can see that same information. What you'll notice there, though, is if I want added restlessness information, or if I want the sleeping heart rate, that does require the Fitbit Premium subscription. Now, restlessness is not something offered by any other competitors, free or otherwise. So in that case, you're not really at a loss by not having it. And I didn't see myself at a loss by not having it. You pretty much know if you have a restless night sleeping, like last night wasn't so awesome. I don't need an app to tell me that. Whereas as for the sleeping heart rate, that is something the vast majority of the competitors do offer for free. What you'll see missing though from this list right here is you will not see the SpO2 readings, the direct SpO2 readings like you would on either the Fitbit Inspire or the Fitbit Sense or really any other Fitbit products. You will also not see the skin temperature. Again, something offered at the $99 Fitbit Inspire 3 level. I'm not sure if that's something they get to down the road, but it's certainly not there today. And again, even in the grand scheme of things, I haven't really found a lot of use for skin temperature today, just from a general sleeping standpoint. Where skin temperature is more useful is around female health tracking, in particular ovulation cycle tracking and ovulation cycle prediction. But forward-looking ovulation cycle or period prediction is not something that Fitbit has done at all today, let alone something that we've seen Google kind of hint at. But it is something I suspect a year from now will probably be on these watches because it is becoming more and more standard across the industry. Now, let's talk about workouts. So to access the workout menu, you're going to swipe from the right and you'll see the exercise menu. At the top, you've got 3 kind of quick select options there, and then you can go down and choose from any other sport modes that you want to. There's quite a few sport modes, I'll give them credit there. Once you choose a sport mode, you can swipe up to customize the data page for it, basically the data fields that you're going to have on that. There is not much selection here though. You've got essentially 4 data fields that you can configure with a handful of data metric options. I mean, nothing compared to something like a Garmin watch or even an Apple Watch with watchOS 9. It's fairly limited. That's only, again, 1 data page that you can work with. You can also set a goal. It can be a distance, time, or calorie-based goal in the case of running, for example, and then you just simply hit go. Before you do that though, you will wait for GPS signal. And the good news is that's super quick on the Pixel Watch. Like, kudos to them, it's very, very solid here. Whereas on the Fitbit Sense 2, the GPS acquisition takes a long time, and then when it finds it, it forgets it. And then once you're out running, it just isn't accurate at all. I mean, a lot about this with any of the sensors is not good at all. But the good news on the Pixel Watch, that's not the same sensor. Clearly, it's very, very solid on acquisition time. And then once you're out running, as I'll show in the accuracy section, it's also pretty solid too. But first we'll tap to get started, and then you're gonna see that data metric page while you're running. You can see a screenshot of it right here, a photo of it right here. You can also swipe to the right to see like a list of tiles of like your workout totals, if you will. This is really bizarre. This is something this makes no sense to me at all. So as I'm running along, I can theoretically swipe up like Instagram style and see all these total tiles. I don't know why they just didn't use like a data page like every other watch since the beginning of time. I don't want to be like scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through this list to see all these totals. And it would have been redeeming if I could have clicked on one of these tiles, or sorry, tapped on one of these tiles to see more detailed information about that mid-run. I could have maybe excused it then, but this makes no sense whatsoever. And I really hope they just abandon this and give me like normal data pages. Nonetheless, at least while I'm running, the screen is super easy to see. Even in bright sunlight, I had no problems at all. The wrist raise detection for dimming and brightening the screen also worked very well. Again, and even just swiping through it with sweaty fingers to go ahead and hit the pause button, no problems there either. At the end of the workout, I'll see a quick summary of my active zone minutes, which is kind of like my workout minutes, if you will, based on heart rate zones. And then I'll also go ahead and see a summary of the workout. It's pretty basic. It doesn't show you like a GPS track of where you went. Instead, all of that is available on the Fitbit app. So I can look at the Fitbit app. I can see way more information about the run, my paces, my zones, a GPS plot of my particular route, and all that's available there. And then if you have third-party apps connected to Fitbit like Strava, it'll send that data off instantly as well to Strava. And now this seems like a good segue to just generally third-party apps on the Pixel Watch. Given the fact that the Pixel Watch is WearOS, that means you can download apps from the WearOS App Store. And over the last year or so, since Samsung introduced the first WearOS watch on WearOS 3, we've seen that store not only expand, but the apps in that store have gotten way better. 2 or 3 years ago, the WearOS App Store was just pretty rough. It was a part of town you didn't really want to be in. But now things have improved, and I think that's going to improve quite a bit more now that Google has their own hardware. So in my case, I downloaded the Strava app, the Komoot app, even the Spotify app. In the case of Spotify, for example, I could download music onto the watch for playback without my phone nearby, so offline playback. You can do the same with YouTube Music as well, but I'm just more aligned to the Spotify world, and that all works pretty well and easy. In the case of Strava, you can do a workout from there. You can also go ahead and enable the beacon, so that gives you kind of live tracking type functionality directly from the watch. Beyond that, you've got all the Google apps that you would expect on WearOS. That includes Google Maps, Google Wallet, Google Assistant, as I showed earlier, and all those things are pretty much just as they were in the past. So for example, in the case of Google Maps, you can do turn-by-turn navigation somewhere, but it's very equivalent to what you'd expect from car navigation as opposed to trail navigation where you're loading a trail in there and going out and doing a loop and coming back again. That doesn't exist today in the Google Maps experience. Instead, you want to use Komoot for that. But again, that's sort of the power of the WearOS platform and any sort of wearable platform that has third-party apps to be able to fill in those gaps. Still, there are a lot of gaps today, and I think that's something that's probably important to talk about before we talk about accuracy. If we look at the sprinklers that are now turning on here, okay, so far I'm dry, so I think I'm good. If we look at the overall kind of gaps in the platform, for example, on the sports side, there are sports features here, yes, in the native functionality of the Pixel Watch, but there's not nearly as many sports features as on the Fitbit watches. For example, on the Fitbit watches, I can do interval workouts natively with the sports options there. I can't do that on the Pixel watches. That's just one small example. Another example is sensor support. There is no ability to pair a heart rate sensor with the native Fitbit app. You can pair a heart rate sensor with the watch. That you can do. I tried that. Didn't seem to work very well, but at least it does pair technically. But then from there, you go ahead and use a third-party app to leverage a heart rate sensor or cycling sensors or whatever it may be, but not the native Fitbit and kind of Pixel apps for doing that. And the same is also true for something like heart rate broadcasting. If you wanted to pair this up to, for example, a Peloton bike or some third-party sports app or third-party sports device that isn't supported today natively, there may be third-party apps that can fill that gap, but again, not natively on the watch today. Now, this is a great time to dive into the accuracy, so let's jump over to the computer for that. So starting off with the GPS side, on a relatively straightforward course here, it did great. I had no problems tracking exactly the same as other higher-end GPS watches. One minor exception for a few seconds right here where it seemed to put me in the pond, but other than that, it was fine. Going to a much more difficult GPS course, you can see this has some city involvement. We'll get to that in just a second, though. Right here, going under a bridge, no problem, much better than the Fitbit Sense. Here, along some highways, some trees, some other processes, no problems at all. This section, though, is the hardest part. There are 20 to 30 store buildings, only with about 2 lanes in between them. And overall, it didn't do horrific. It is compared, though, against GPS units that cost up to $2,000, and it seemed to hold its own just fine. Now, looking at the heart rate side, this relatively easy run with a couple sprints in it. Very, very solid. The Fitbit Sense was a dumpster fire, as you can see right here. Now, on this other run with a full interval set over and over again, solid. Very, very solid. Even beating the brand new Suunto 9 Peak Pro from an accuracy standpoint. Each one of these sprint intervals, they're about 60 seconds long a pop, pretty much identical to the chest strap. The singular exception was when I took a couple photos right here, it totally lost the plot, and so did the Suunto, but in opposite directions. But that was the only time I've had in any of my testing with the Pixel Watch where the heart rate accuracy wasn't quite right. Okay, so let's kind of wrap things up a little bit here. The first thing is the bezels. Now, it's something I didn't mention earlier on, but I want to kind of touch on briefly here, because a lot of people have talked about the bezels, and I gotta be honest, you just don't notice it in real life. In fact, that's been the general reviewer kind of feedback for people that were at the launch event and have been using it. is that in real life, you don't notice the bezels largely because of the way the design of the watch is, the taper around the glass tapers off like so curved that it just feels kind of natural. So again, the bezel does not at all bother me on this watch. The main downside is probably just the size of this watch. For me, being a relatively tall dude, this just feels kind of small and a little bit dainty. And I get that, you know, Google had to find some starting point for the hardware and they went for the mass market starting point. I suspect a year from now, we'll probably see multiple sizes of this watch in a second gen version, just like Apple and Samsung and many other companies have. But for starting somewhere, this is probably fine for most people. And I think in general, this is a good starting point. It's a promising starting point. Is it a second, third, fourth, fifth, eighth gen product? Of course not. You can see that clearly in not just the software features, but the hardware features, but it is a very solid first start. And I think having that WearOS App Store and having the kind of power behind Google now being a hardware developer of their own in the WearOS ecosystem means that we're gonna see those apps get a lot better, a lot quicker. Now, as far as how it compares to the Fitbit Sense 2, which is $50 cheaper, I would choose Pixel Watch any day, every single day. Of course, the Pixel Watch does require an Android phone, the Fitbit Sense 2 doesn't, but the Fitbit Sense 2 is just bad on so many levels, and you'll get my full in-depth review on that soon. But things like there's no more third-party app support, they removed Spotify support, they removed just a lot of other features that just make no sense for a theoretical smartwatch. The GPS and the heart rate accuracy is absolutely horrendous. It just seems like they made this watch bad on purpose, and I don't understand why. And maybe it's to sell more Pixel watches, but that's just a lot of effort to go to just to sell more Pixel watches. And then again, for those gaps that do exist on the Pixel Watch today, I think we're going to see most of those software gaps probably filled pretty quickly over the coming months and over the next year. In talking with Google, they seem very well aware of where those gaps are today, and I don't think it's going to take too long for them to start to fill them. So while this watch may not be the best for hardcore sports folks, it is a pretty solid option overall and a great starting point for Google. With that, hopefully you found this video interesting or useful. If so, go ahead and like that like button at the bottom there, or subscribe for plenty more sports technology goodness. Have a good one.